So, if you visit a Unitarian Universalist congregation for the first time, knowing nothing about Unitarian Universalism, and you ask one of the regular attenders or members, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? You might first experience a longer pause than usual in a conversation before you hear a response. If you're really observant, you might notice the person actually appearing somewhat tongue-tied. At that point, don't jump to any conclusions about the person or about Unitarian Universalism. In fact, you may have come face to face in that moment with mystery. How is it that folks who typically have a lot to say about everything, just take my word for it, may actually pause, seem to have been moved to silence, and maybe can't readily speak? What might be happening in that moment of hesitation is that the typical Unitarian Universalist, the UU, may be asking themselves, how do I put this? What do I focus on? How do I respond fairly and accurately? The fact of the matter is that Unitarian Universalists tend to have a variety of perspectives on what they believe, not only among themselves, but also within themselves. Sometimes the question can feel daunting. As a matter of fact, if there is not this self-reflective pause, this is a cause for worry. For example, with good intentions, a UU might blurt out, "Oh, Unitarian Universalists can believe whatever they want." Don't fall for that. Instead, if you ever hear a UU say that, then I suggest respond by asking another question. Anything? Let's try that right now. Anything? Good. Now you're moving to a new place. What was a question, anticipating a simple, succinct answer, now has become a conversation. Now we're talking, so to speak. At our best, conversations that matter is when Unitarian Universalists become alive. By staying in the conversation long enough and not falling for a quick answer, question and answer format, you enter that place of curiosity where creative interchange can occur. It was Unitarian Henry Nelson Wyman that first offered the understanding of creative interchange as a worthwhile practice in our world, and he added in a congregation in which multiple perspectives might be present. It's not just that Unitarian Universalists have various beliefs and perspectives on religious matters that makes us unique. It is our willingness to enter into dialogue with one another, what Wyman called creative interchange, that clarifies what our communities are about. Creative interchange could be defined as a free, mutual, authentic expression of self, one to another, while understanding and appreciating each other. Another way to define it is an appreciative understanding of the original experience of the other. That requires staying in the conversation, listening and learning from differences, and really attending long enough to hear the original experience of each other. That requires openness. So Unitarian Universalists are not a question and one answer kind of people. Instead, we become alive in the conversation, that creative interchange, that holy conversation, when we engage with one another and stand even for the briefest moment on the edge of discovery where learning and growth and revelation in the moment can occur. Now, you see, I grew up in a tradition that was all about questions and answers. Each question had a particular answer, typically a succinct and one right answer. It was called learning the catechism. My mother was Italian, my father was Irish, so I was genetically Roman Catholic. Now, although they each interpreted that faith differently, it was the one thing that they had in common, and they raised me in this faith. Here's Exhibit A. Here's a photo of me with my second grade class at Our Lady of the Most Holy Rosary School. Now, I know some of you won't be able to hear another thing I say until you figure out where am I in that photo, right? Okay, so I'll help you. Do your own guessing for a moment. Okay, I'm in the second row, and I'm almost in the middle, 6 from the left, 5th from the right. Get it?
The one with the halo.
Yes. Better than a stigmata. So everything appears uniform, so to speak, in this photo. And that is how it tended to be in those days with Catholicism. I learned my catechism. I learned the right answers to the right questions to ask. It was all very straightforward then. Then, let's fast forward. By the time I was 17, I was riding my bicycle to the first Unitarian Universalist congregation that I ever attended. No one invited me. I was self-propelled because I was trying to make sense of this world and myself following the death of my mother when I was 16. My adolescent mind started to explore outside of the boxes of my inherited faith tradition. I was looking for some possible new ground to stand on and to guide me. I sought my own answers to those catechism questions that had been so drilled in me as a child. And on that Sunday that I arrived, there wasn't an open house. No one anticipated my arrival. It was a kind of clandestine adventure on my part. I thought I would just slip in and slip out. Now, this was in the dark ages before the internet. So I had read a little bit about Unitarian Universalism and whatever I could find beforehand. And then I was engaged and entranced a little by the service. It was so different than what I had experienced up until then. So following the service, I gravitated towards the back of the sanctuary. I'm often lured by books. And there was a library. There in the back, a volunteer librarian received me. She engaged me in conversation. She embraced my many questions about faith, about life, about Unitarian Universalism. She was patient. And she gave me no easy, ready-made answers. Instead, she listened to me. She conversed with me. She offered me her responses, and then she asked me more questions, and I asked her more questions, and we engaged in a conversation, and then invariably, she equipped me with things to read and ways to learn for myself. I had a sense that she was interested in me, and I learned about her as much as I learned about this Unitarian Universalist church. Upon deeper reflection, over the years, it was her presence that taught me more than whatever it was that she said. It was her attentiveness that conveyed to me more than any lofty ideals could ever convey. It was her engagement with me in reflective listening and guiding questions that caught my heart as well as my head. She prompted me to open up, and she received me with curiosity and compassion. That perhaps was my first real experience of what I've referred to as creative interchange. Indeed, I felt I was participating in holy conversations, in conversations where something holy was occurring within me and between us. If it wasn't for her embodiment for me of what Unitarian Universalism practice looks like, I don't know if I would have ever continued to return or to seek to find a UU church when I went away to college the next year. It was her presence, her attentiveness, her engagement, and her embodiment of openness to inquiry that spoke to me so directly. I got this practical sense that within the Unitarian Universalist congregation, I would be able to continue to grow, to learn, to deepen, and to explore throughout my lifetime. I got the sense that for Unitarian Universalists, their ways of being in the world conveys what do you use, believe, as much or more than the words that we tend to use. Our ways of being in the world perhaps communicate more directly what it is that we believe, and it does matter what we believe, since it creates the atmosphere in which we either grow or don't grow. The place where we can cultivate our souls and discern where we want to direct our caring for this world. In fact, one of our Unitarian Universalist ministers and educators, Sophia Lyon-Foz, explicitly stated that, and I'm going to quote her, "It matters what you believe." Some people are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding our days and fears of unknown calamities. And other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing us with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating saved from unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. And other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. And other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world, and other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. It matters what we believe. And Foz wrote that in a time before the resurgence of a Christian nationalism that is trying to impose a particular set of beliefs in our society as a whole. We, as Unitarian Universalists, are focused on how we might continue to help this world and not so much an afterlife. We're focused on how we might continue to, as our ancestors said, cultivate our soul rather than imagine ourselves as originally sinful or blemished or unable to change, grow, and learn. We are focused on being inspired by the world's religious traditions and science and art and literature and our own Unitarian Universalist tradition and history. We draw from a variety of sources within the world's religious traditions and human arts and sciences. We draw from what we call sources of our living tradition. We find inspiration in these various sources, and we make them our own when they make sense to us, when they nurture our spirit, when they motivate us towards caring, loving, and liberating action in the world. So when someone in a conversation says, UUs can believe anything that they want, What they really mean to say is as an individual, each of us may choose anything among our various sources that speak to us and can also expand upon them. What they really mean to say is that our religion making as individuals is as much an art, as much as an improvisational dance, as a living, moving response to our life experiences and our desires to be a healing and liberating presence in the world. Right? For in fact, as a Unitarian Universalist community, we move to the rhythms of mystery and wonder, prophecy and wisdom, teachings from ancient and modern sources, and to nature itself. That is the shorthanded way to say that as a Unitarian Universalist community, we draw from a living tradition that is living because we have tended to find what gives life to us and to others through these various sources of our living tradition. Direct experience, prophetic people, the world's religious traditions, Jewish and Christian teachings, humanist teachings, spiritual teachings of the earth-centered traditions. Agreed, that's a lot of words, something you are great at. But hopefully you can see those words as an artist's palette of many colors from which we engage in the artistry of our religion making as Unitarian Universalists. We are, as you know, increasingly in a multi-faith, multi-racial, multi-ethnic world where we are in relationships with and work alongside and strive with others to address the common concerns of our communities and our world. And as a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we strive to be a multi-religious community that honors our own unique history and perspectives, but also reaches across and beyond to join hands and to connect with that source, with that creative power, with God, known by many names, and to work alongside others to engage with the common concerns of poverty, of being unhoused, being a refugee, of our climate emergency, of our threats to democracy, and the threats to human rights of others, particularly the historically marginalized, and our concerns for peace. We challenge ourselves as Unitarian Universalists to live out what we call our principles, in which each has its roots in our religious history. James Luther Adams, a Unitarian theologian and social ethicist, said that we don't believe in the immaculate conception of virtue, but in the necessity of social incarnation, of making real the principles that we affirm. And so our principles, which you might be able to view here, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, all of those principles I understand as practices. None of these principles are easy to practice. These are the practices that we seek to embody in our life together as a Unitarian Universalist congregation and within our lives in the world. Now, the interesting thing about a practice is that we keep rehearsing a practice. We keep trying. Sometimes we do it well and sometimes we don't. We keep returning to a practice. We keep practicing again and again, over and over. In my opinion, a good question to ask a Unitarian Universalist is, what do you care about? And that was the question I asked those who participated in the video that you saw. I discovered there's typically not a long pause when you ask a Unitarian Universalist that question. You'll find that almost invariably someone in our congregation will have something to say about themselves, about their congregation, about how they engage in these practices in their day-to-day life and work, or how as a congregation we express and live out these principles in the world. You might see a Unitarian Universalist congregation as a greenhouse. Here we spend time in our worship services to nurture our spirits, to discern our response to the world and our concerns in our own lives, to experience the healing and joy of music, to meditate and to pray and to care for another. Here we provide experiences for our children and our youth to explore who they are, to learn about the world's religious traditions and Unitarian Universalism, and to express care for the local community and our wider world. Here we gather as adults in our various small groups and our various adult programs to practice what it means to be human, to cultivate what it means to be human religiously. Here we gather to organize ourselves to the larger issues of our community. The list goes on house, the hungry, the rights of women, LGBTQ+, historically marginalized people, the larger issues in our country, the threats to democracy, polarization in our world. We respond and discern our response through joining also in the global work of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. So, my friends, we need a sacred center within ourselves in a world that is so distressed and distracted. Yes? We need a sacred center to return to a community that reminds us to be a house of hope in a time in which the more convenient choice is despair. Yes? We need a sacred center to ground us in our work to address the hurts of our world and respond to the hopes of the wider community in the world. Yes. May we commit ourselves again and again to be that sacred center, to find that sacred center within, among, and beyond us, so that we can truly be a people who care.